The rain had started as a whisper against the windows, a soft drizzle that barely disturbed the silence of the evening. I remember thinking it was almost comforting, like a lullaby from the sky. But within an hour, it turned into a violent downpour, rattling the roof and battering the garden. I sat in the living room, my hands wrapped around a cup of tea, listening to the storm. The thunder rolled in the distance, each clap echoing like an omen. That was when I heard laughter from the kitchen. My son, Daniel, and his wife, Melissa, were home for dinner. They had been married 2 years, and though I tried my best to welcome Melissa into the family, she often seemed to look at me as if I were an intruder in my own house. Her smiles never reached her eyes, and her words always carried a hidden edge. Daniel, my only child, had always been my pride, but since his marriage, I often felt like a stranger in his world. I forced myself to smile when they walked into the living room, but my chest was already heavy with the tension that hung between us. Daniel glanced at me, his expression unreadable, while Melissa's smirk seemed to carry a secret only she knew. "We're going out for a walk," Melissa announced, slipping on her coat. "The rain is fun, don't you think?" Her tone was playful, but there was something biting beneath it. Daniel chuckled, following her lead, and for a moment I felt relieved. Maybe a walk would lighten the mood. I nodded and turned back to my tea, listening as the door opened and slammed shut behind them. 15 minutes later, I decided to check the mailbox. The rain had grown heavier, but the storm was oddly beautiful. I grabbed my umbrella and stepped outside, closing the door softly behind me. The cold air wrapped around me instantly, and the raindrops hit my umbrella like tiny stones. I walked down the path toward the gate, my slippers soaking through in seconds. When I turned back, I froze. The porch light illuminated the front door, and standing there were Daniel and Melissa, their faces pressed against the glass. They were laughing. At first, I thought they were waving me back in, maybe teasing me for stepping out in the storm. But then Melissa leaned forward, twisted the lock, and I heard the unmistakable click. I hurried up the steps, my umbrella slipping in my hand. "What are you doing?" I shouted, my voice rising above the roar of the rain. Melissa's laugh carried through the glass. "Just having a little fun," she called out. Daniel laughed too, though there was hesitation in his voice. My hand grasped the doorknob. It refused to turn. Panic flared in my chest. "Daniel, unlock the door right now. This isn't funny." But they only laughed harder. Melissa wrapped her arm around my son's shoulders, whispering something in his ear that made him chuckle again. The betrayal stung sharper than the cold rain soaking into my clothes. This was my son, the boy I had raised with every ounce of love I had, now standing on the other side of my own door, locking me out like I was nothing more than a nuisance. Storm howled around me, the wind pulling at my umbrella until it snapped backward. The metal spokes bent, useless against the fury of the sky. I dropped it onto the porch, my hair plastered against my face, water streaming down my cheeks like tears. "Please," I tried again, my voice breaking. "Daniel, open the door. You cannot do this to me." For a moment I thought I saw guilt flicker across his face. His hand twitched toward the lock, but Melissa grabbed his wrist. "She'd be fine," she said. "It's just rain, just rain." The words sliced into me. To them, it was a joke. To me, it was a humiliation so deep I could hardly breathe. I pounded on the door with my fists, the sound drowned by thunder. "You're my son. How can you stand there and watch this?" Melissa pressed her face against the glass again, her grin wide and cruel. "Maybe you'll learn not to be so controlling. You always act like this house is yours and yours alone. Well, maybe it's time you understood that things have changed." The world tilted around me. My knees trembled, not from the cold but from the sheer disbelief of her words. This was my house. My name was on the deed. I had built this home from the ground up with my late husband. Every wall, every brick carried memories of my life, my sacrifices, my love. And now, my son's wife dared to throw it in my face, as though I were a guest overstaying my welcome. "Daniel," I whispered, my voice hoarse, "do you really agree with this?" His eyes darted between me and Melissa. He didn't answer. He didn't move. He just stood there, silent, complicit. The storm raged on, and I realized they had no intention of letting me inside. I was trapped outside my own home, shivering, drenched, and broken. My body shook with cold, but it was the betrayal that froze me to my core. I stumbled down the steps, searching for another way in. The back door, the garage. But when I reached the back, I found every entrance locked tight. My keys were still. Inside, lying on the table where I had left them. My phone too. I had nothing but the soaked clothes clinging to my skin. By the time I returned to the front, they were gone. The lights inside flickered, shadows moving as they retreated deeper into the house. The laughter faded, replaced by the muffled sound of a television. They had locked me out and then simply moved on, as if my suffering were nothing more than a passing amusement. I sank onto the porch steps, my arms wrapped around myself. The rain hammered down, pooling at my feet, chilling me to the bone. My breath came in ragged gasps, my heart pounding like a drum of war. I felt the world closing in, a suffocating darkness pressing against me. How had it come to this? How had the boy I had nurtured, protected, and loved with every heartbeat turned into a man who would stand by and let his wife humiliate me in this way? I thought of the nights I had stayed awake to rock him to sleep, the sacrifices I had made to give him a good life, the tears I had shed when he graduated, married, and promised me he would never forget where he came from. And now here I was, cast out into the storm like a stranger, abandoned on the doorstep of the very home I had built. A car passed on the street, its headlights cutting through the rain for a brief moment. I wanted to wave it down, to scream for help, but the shame held me still. How could I let anyone see me like this? An old woman locked out of her own home by her own child. Thunder cracked overhead, shaking the house, and I knew I couldn't stay on the porch all night. I forced myself to stand, my legs heavy, my body trembling. Somewhere deep inside me, a spark ignited, a mixture of rage and resolve. They thought this was a joke, a harmless prank, but I would not be humiliated so easily. I would find a way back in, and when I did, they would understand that a mother's dignity is not something to be toyed with. As I pressed my palm against the cold, wet door, I whispered to myself, "This is the night everything changes." The storm raged louder, and with it, the storm inside me began to rise. The storm did not relent through the night. By the time I dragged myself around to the back porch again, the rain had turned the yard into a swamp, the ground squelching under every step. My hair clung to my face, my clothes felt like lead, and yet the fire inside me burned hotter than the thunder rumbling above. When I reached the kitchen window, I cupped my hands against the glass and peered inside. The sight knocked the breath out of me. There they were, Daniel and Melissa, sitting at my kitchen table. My kitchen table? They were warm, dry, laughing as they poured wine into glasses that I had once polished with my own hands. Daniel raised his glass in a toast. Melissa leaned in close, whispering something that made him chuckle. They looked like a couple enjoying a romantic evening in their cozy home, except that home was mine. I stood outside like a beggar in the rain, reduced to a shadow on the other side of the glass. I pounded once on the window. Daniel's head snapped up. For a second, our eyes met. His smile faltered. He saw me. He knew I was still out there. My lips formed the words, "Open the door." But Melissa placed her hand over his, and whatever weakness he might have felt vanished beneath her touch. He looked away, pretending not to see me. The betrayal was sharper than the cold. I staggered back, clutching my chest. Every thud of my heart felt like a hammer striking against broken glass. I tried the garage door, locked. I tried the side door that led to the laundry room, locked. Every entryway, every possible path inside had been sealed. They had not simply locked me out in a moment of careless laughter. They had planned this. They wanted me out. I returned to the front, collapsing against the porch wall. Listening to the storm and the faint hum of the television inside, I could make out the glow from the living room window, silhouettes moving across the curtains. They were comfortable. They were safe. And they had left me to drown in rain and shame. Hours passed. The storm eventually softened, but the damage was done. My body shook uncontrollably, my skin cold and raw, my lips trembling. I must have drifted in and out of consciousness because the next thing I knew, dawn light was creeping over the horizon. The rain had thinned to a drizzle, and the house was silent. My house looked different in the gray morning light. The windows, once welcoming, now glared like watchful eyes. The garden, usually a sanctuary, was a battlefield of mud and broken branches. The door that had once opened to me without question now loomed as a barrier, a reminder of what had been. Taken, I pushed myself up, my bones aching. Something inside me hardened. They thought I would give up, that I would accept humiliation and crawl away quietly. But I was not a woman to be erased from her own life. I walked around to the side of the house again, scanning for any weakness. My gaze fell on the basement window. It was small, almost hidden by the overgrown bushes, but I remembered that the lock on it had been faulty for years. My late husband had promised to fix it, but life had gotten in the way, and we never did. I knelt in the mud, pulling the branches aside. My fingers trembled as I pressed against the glass. It budged slightly. My heart leapt. I pushed harder, and with a groan of protest, the window slid open just enough for me to squeeze through. The smell of damp concrete and old wood hit me as I dropped into the darkness of the basement. I landed hard on my knees, pain shooting up my legs, but I bit back the cry. I was inside. My heart raced with both relief and fury. The basement was filled with boxes, relics of a life I had built over decades. Photo albums, holiday decorations, my husband's old tools. I ran my hand across them, the dust mixing with the wetness of my skin. This was my history, my foundation. And I had just crawled back into it like a fugitive. I moved slowly, careful not to make noise. My bare feet patted against the cold floor as I searched for the stairs. Every creak of the wood above made me freeze. I could hear them moving around, their voices muffled but clear enough to remind me I was not safe. When I finally reached the stairs, I paused, gripping the railing. My mind swirled with questions. What would I do if they found me? Would Daniel shove me back outside? Would Melissa mock me again, her words sharp as knives? Or worse, would they call the police and claim I was trespassing in my own home? The thought sent a chill through me, colder than the rain had been. Trespassing in my house. The house I had paid for, maintained, and filled with memories. Yet with one twist of a lock, they had made me an outsider, and the law might not see the difference. I climbed the stairs, each step groaning under my weight. When I reached the top, I pressed my ear against the door. Silence. I turned the knob slowly, my breath caught in my throat. To my shock, it was unlocked. I pushed it open, an inch, then another, until I could slip into the hallway. The house smelled of coffee and toast. The smell hit me like a punch. They had enjoyed breakfast while I had shivered outside all night. I crept down the hall, my heart pounding. The living room was empty, but the sound of clinking dishes came from the kitchen. I peeked around the corner. There they were again, sitting together as if nothing had happened. Melissa wore one of my robes, her hair tied up in a towel. Daniel was scrolling through his phone, a plate of eggs and toast in front of him. My plate, my kitchenware, my home. Rage surged through me. I wanted to storm in, to shout, to demand answers, but something stopped me. A memory, the look on Melissa's face the night before, the way Daniel had let her words control him. I realized then that this was not just about a prank. This was a test, a power game. Melissa wanted me gone, and Daniel was letting her win. I stepped back, retreating into the shadows of the hallway. If I confronted them now, they would only twist the story, make me the villain. I needed to be smarter. I needed to understand why they were doing this, to gather my strength before I struck back. I retreated into the basement, closing the door quietly behind me. The darkness welcomed me again, but this time it felt different. I was not a victim hiding from the rain. I was a mother planning her next move. As I sat among the boxes of my past, I began to piece together the fragments of truth, the little remarks Melissa had made about the house being too big for me alone. The way Daniel had recently asked about transferring the property into joint names. The sudden interest they both had in my finances. It all clicked into place. This was not just a cruel prank. This was the beginning of something larger. They wanted control. They wanted everything, and they had underestimated me. I spent the rest of the morning hidden in the basement, my body aching from the cold night outside. My clothes were still damp, clinging to me like a second skin, but the fire inside me refused to die. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Melissa smirk through the glass door. Daniel's silence, the way he stood there as if my suffering were entertainment. The images twisted in my chest until anger became sharper than any blade. But anger alone was not enough. I needed clarity. I needed to know what they were planning. So when the house grew quiet again, I crept up the basement stairs and pressed my ear to the door. Voices floated from the living room. Melissa's was sharp and cutting. Daniel's lower and hesitant. She is not going to hand this house over willingly, Melissa said. We have to push her. You saw how stubborn she was last night. If we don't take control, we will be stuck waiting for years. My heart clenched. House control, the pieces fit too easily. Daniel sighed. I just do not know if this is the right way. She is my mother. Locking her out in the rain was cruel. Melissa's laugh was like nails on glass. You called that cruel? She needed to be reminded that this is not her kingdom anymore. We are building our future here, Daniel. Do you really want to keep living like a guest in your own home? Guest? The word seared through me. Melissa continued, her voice dripping with calculation. Think about it. Once the house is in our name, we can renovate, maybe even sell it and buy something modern. Do you really want to be trapped in her old memories forever? She had her time. Now it is ours. Daniel was silent for a long moment. I pressed closer to the door, my pulse hammering in my ears. Finally, he spoke. But what if she fights back? She cannot. Melissa snapped. She is old, Daniel, tired. You saw her last night, shivering, begging. She is weak. She cannot fight us. Not if we play this right. All we need is a little more pressure. My knees nearly gave way. Old, weak, begging. That was how she saw me. That was how she wanted Daniel to see me too. I backed away from the door, my breath coming in sharp bursts. For years, I had believed my son's marriage was simply strained by the natural tensions of family blending. But this was no misunderstanding. This was a plan, a deliberate attempt to erase me from the life I had built. I needed to act carefully. If I confronted them now, they would twist my words, accuse me of paranoia, maybe even claim I had broken in through the basement to cause trouble. No, I had to stay silent. To watch, to gather the evidence of their betrayal before I struck. The day passed in fragments. I hid in the basement when I heard them moving about, only creeping out when the house fell quiet. My stomach growled, but I dared not take food from the kitchen. Every sound felt like it could give me away. I survived on the bottle of water I found among the old boxers and the determination that burned hotter than hunger. That evening, as the sun dipped low, I crept up again. Their voices reached me before I reached the door. This time, they were in the dining room. She will not just leave, Daniel said. She has nowhere else to go. Then we give her a reason, Melissa replied. We lock her out again. Maybe we change the locks permanently this time. If she cannot get in, she will have no choice but to find somewhere else. We can tell the neighbors she moved to a retirement place. Who would question it? You are talking about throwing my mother out onto the street. Melissa's voice softened, but it was the softness of poison wrapped in sugar. I am talking about building a life for us. Do you really want our children growing up under her rules? Do you want them to feel like visitors in their own home? This house will suffocate us if we let her keep control. Silence again. Then, Daniel's voice, heavy and uncertain. I just need time. You do not have time, Melissa snapped. She will not live forever, but she could make our lives miserable until the end. We need to act now, before she realizes what we are doing. I pressed my back against the wall, my nails digging into my palms. They thought I was blind. They thought I was broken. But I was listening. Every word etched itself into me like a scar. Night fell. The storm had passed, leaving the air heavy and damp. The ground outside glistening under the moonlight. I sat on the basement floor, my back against the cold wall, replaying their conversation. They wanted me gone. Not just for a night, not just as a cruel prank. Permanently. For a moment, fear crept in. I was one woman against two. One aging mother against the combined will of a son I no longer recognized and a daughter-in-law who saw me as an obstacle. But fear quickly hardened into resolve. I had not survived the storms of life, the loss of my husband, the endless sacrifices of motherhood, only to be discarded now. The house was my fortress, my history, my legacy, and if they wanted to take it from me, they would learn just how fiercely I could fight. The next morning, I heard the front door close as they left together. My chance had come. I climbed out of the basement and walked through the house. Every room told a story. The photographs on the walls, the furniture chosen with care, the books that lined the shelves. This was not just a building. It was the map of my life, and I would not let anyone erase it. I went into the kitchen and opened the drawer where I had kept important papers, empty. My breath caught. I searched the study next, yanking open drawers, flipping through files. Half the documents were missing. The deed to the house, bank statements, insurance papers. My vision blurred. They had already started. I sank into the chair, my hands trembling, against the table. This was not simply emotional cruelty anymore. This was theft, calculation, A plan set in motion while I had been locked outside like an intruder. The sound of the front door opening snapped me upright. Panic surged through me. They were back. I rushed to the basement door, slipping inside just as their voices drifted down the hall. "Did you grab the papers?" Melissa asked. "Yes," Daniel said. "They are in the car. I will drop them off at the lawyer's office this afternoon." My blood ran cold. A lawyer. This was no longer a game. They were making legal moves against me. Melissa laughed. A satisfied sound. "Perfect. Soon, this place will officially be ours. She will not even see it coming." I pressed my hand against my mouth to keep from crying out. My chest felt like it was caving in. They were stealing my home, my life, while I hid in the shadows of my own basement. But as the fear threatened to consume me, a voice inside me rose, strong and unyielding. No, this was not the end. This was the beginning. They thought they were clever. They thought I was broken. But I was watching. I was listening. And soon, I would act. The basement no longer felt like a refuge. It was a tomb, a place where shadows pressed against me, whispering of betrayal. I could not keep hiding like a frightened ghost in my own home. If Daniel and Melissa wanted me gone, they would have to face a woman who had survived too much to surrender. Morning light crept in through the small basement window. I sat cross-legged on the concrete floor, my back against a stack of boxes. My mind replayed every word I had overheard the night before. A lawyer, papers, ownership. They were moving faster than I had imagined. If I did not act, I would wake one day to find myself legally erased from the very walls that held my memories. I stood and brushed the dirt from my clothes. My body ached, but my resolve had sharpened. It was time to move. When the house grew quiet, I crept up the stairs again and listened at the door. Melissa's voice floated faintly from the living room, but Daniel was nowhere to be heard. I risked slipping into the hallway, keeping my footsteps light. The study was my first stop. The drawers I had searched yesterday were still in disarray, but I forced myself to go through them again. Nothing. Melissa had been thorough. I checked behind the books on the shelf, beneath the cushions of the armchair, even inside the vases that decorated the mantel. Empty. The important papers were gone. Frustration clawed at me. If I could not find the documents, then I had to find proof, something that revealed their scheme. My gaze drifted to the desk. The laptop sat open, a faint glow on the screen. I approached cautiously, glancing toward the living room to make sure Melissa had not heard me. The screen displayed an email draft. My heart raced as I leaned closer to read. "Dear Mr. Hansen, as discussed, please prepare the transfer of title paperwork. Daniel and I will bring the signed documents by tomorrow. Thank you for expediting this process." The message was signed with Melissa's name. I swallowed hard. She was orchestrating everything. Daniel was merely a puppet dancing on the strings she pulled. I copied the details onto a scrap of paper from the printer tray, my hands trembling. Mr. Hansen, a lawyer, a name, finally, in this storm of shadows. If I could get to him, perhaps I could intercept whatever they were planning. Footsteps echoed in the hallway. Panic surged. I slammed the laptop shut and ducked behind the desk just as Melissa entered the study. She muttered to herself, flipping through the mess of drawers. Her sigh of annoyance was sharp, and then she left again, her robe brushing against the doorway as she disappeared down the hall. I exhaled slowly, my body pressed tight against the floor. My heart pounded so loudly I feared she might hear it, even through the walls. Once the coast was clear, I slipped back into the basement, clutching the paper with the lawyer's name like a lifeline. I had something now, a thread to pull. Hours passed. I listened to the rhythm of the house, learning their patterns. Daniel left for work mid-morning. Melissa stayed behind, moving from room to room, humming under her breath as if she were already mistress of the house. She spent hours on the phone, her voice sharp and commanding. I caught fragments when she passed near the basement door. Bank accounts, renovations, future plans. She was not just trying to push me out. She was building a life without me in it. A kingdom where I was nothing but a ghost story, whispered in hallways. By late afternoon, Melissa left as well. The sound of the front door closing filled me with relief. I waited until the house settled into silence before creeping out again. I went straight to the kitchen. My body screamed for food, but my mind focused on evidence. I opened the fridge, and there, stuck to the door with a magnet, was a folded paper. I pulled it free. It was a list in Melissa's neat handwriting. Call Mr. Hansen, get signatures finalized, change locks, schedule appraisal, retirement brochure. My breath caught at the last item, retirement brochure. A vision flashed in my mind. Melissa standing on the porch, smiling sweetly as she handed me a pamphlet for a retirement home. Daniel nodding along, telling me it was for the best. They wanted me out of the house, not temporarily, but permanently. I shoved the paper into my pocket. My pulse quickened. The storm had passed outside, but inside me, a new one raged. I needed allies. I could not fight this alone. Neighbors, friends, perhaps the lawyer himself. But whom could I trust? If Melissa was bold enough to lock me out in the rain, bold enough to strip the house of documents, then she was bold enough to spin lies to anyone who asked. Still, I could not sit idle. I found my phone charger tucked away in one of the basement. Boft as my phone had died the night I was locked out. But with power now, I could reach beyond these walls. I plugged it in and waited, pacing as the battery crept back to life. When the screen finally lit, I opened my contacts. My sister, Ruth, she had always warned me about Melissa, whispering that something about her smile was too polished, too rehearsed. Maybe Ruth would believe me now, but what could I say? That I was hiding in my basement while my son and his wife plotted to steal my home. Even to me, it sounded like the ravings of a paranoid woman. Still, I typed a message. Ruth, I need you. Something is happening with Daniel and Melissa. They are trying to take the house. Please do not call here. Just text me back. I hesitated, then hit send. The weight of those words settled over me. This was no longer just my private nightmare. Now, someone else knew. If Ruth responded, I would not be alone. But there was no immediate reply. Only silence. That night, I listened again from the basement as Daniel and Melissa spoke in the living room. She looked exhausted yesterday. Daniel said, "What if she gets sick?" Melissa scoffed. "That is not our problem. If anything, it makes things easier. Do you want to keep dragging this out? She is already halfway out the door. You make it sound like we are killing her." Melissa's laugh was chilling. "We are not killing her, Daniel. We are freeing ourselves. Stop being so dramatic." My hands curled into fists. They were playing with my life as if it were a chess game, debating whether I was a pawn or an obstacle. I retreated deeper into the basement, clutching the scrap of paper with the lawyer's name. The walls around me were lined with the artifacts of my life, weeding albums, children's drawings, souvenirs from vacations long past. Each item whispered a reminder. This was my home. My blood, my sweat, my love were in every corner of it, and I would not let them erase me. For the first time since the night I was locked out, I felt a strange calm. The fear was still there, but beneath it was something stronger. A plan was forming, piece by piece, like a puzzle falling into place. Tomorrow, I would not just hide. Tomorrow, I would begin to fight. I barely slept that night. My mind replayed every word I had overheard, every cruel laugh, every plan they laid out to erase me. The shadows of the basement pressed in, but I refused to let them smother me. I was not the weak, helpless woman Melissa believed I was. I had lived through grief, through years of raising a child alone, through battles that had carved lines into my face but never hollowed out my spirit. By dawn, my plan had begun to take shape. I waited until the house grew quiet again, until Daniel left for work and Melissa was distracted in another room. Then, clutching the slip of paper with the lawyer's name, I slipped out of the basement and into the study. The laptop was closed this time, but I did not need it. I had a phone, now fully charged, and I had a name. I sat at the desk, my fingers trembling as I dialed the number one found online for Hansen and Associates. Each ring echoed in my ears like the ticking of a clock counting down my future. Finally, a brisk voice answered. "Hansen and Associates, how may I help you?" I forced calm into my tone. "Yes, I need to speak with Mr. Hansen regarding property transfer papers. It is urgent. One moment, please." The line clicked. Then a deeper voice came through. "This is Mr. Hansen." I swallowed hard. "Mr. Hansen, my name is Margaret. I believe my son and his wife may have contacted you regarding the transfer of a property, this house, my house. I need to confirm what exactly they asked you to prepare." There was a pause, heavy and telling. "I am afraid I cannot disclose client details without their permission, Mrs. Margaret." Panic prickled at the back of my neck. "Please, I am the legal owner of this house. If papers are being prepared without my knowledge, I have the right to know." I need to stop this before it goes further. Another pause, then his voice softened. Off the record, I can tell you this. Your son and his wife approached me. They said you were considering transferring the deed to them. They wanted the paperwork expedited. I told them I would need your signature. Without it, nothing can move forward. Relief washed over me like a tide. They did not have my signature. Not yet. Thank you, I whispered. Please, do not let anything be processed. I will come to your office myself if I need to. I understand, Mr. Hansen said, but be careful. If they believe you are standing in their way, they may try harder to pressure you. The warning cut deep, but I thanked him and ended the call. My hands shook as I set the phone down. For now, the house was still mine. But Melissa's list echoed in my head: change locks, schedule appraisal, retirement brochure. She was not finished. I slipped back into the basement, just as Melissa's footsteps echoed in the hallway above. My pulse hammered, but I felt stronger than I had in days. Knowledge was power, and now I had it. Hours crawled by. Melissa busied herself upstairs, talking on the phone, moving through rooms, humming that same smug tune. I stayed hidden, waiting, gathering strength. By mid-afternoon, I heard the front door close. She had gone out. This was my chance. I climbed the stairs and moved quickly through the house. I searched every corner for evidence, anything that would prove their intent if I needed to fight in court. In the study, I found copies of bank statements with both their names scribbled in the margins. Arrows pointing toward accounts I did not recognize. In the kitchen, I discovered another list taped inside the pantry. Appraiser Thursday, locksmith Friday. I photographed everything with my phone, each click a small victory. If Melissa wanted to play games, I would build my own arsenal. When I reached the living room, I froze. On the coffee table sat a manila envelope, sealed but unmarked. My fingers trembled as I picked it up. Inside were forms transfer of deed documents, already filled out with my name typed neatly above the signature line. Blank space waited for me to surrender everything. Anger burned hot in my chest. They had planned it all, down to the pen strokes. They believed it was only a matter of time before I gave in. I tucked the papers into my sweater and slipped back into the basement. This was evidence, proof of their betrayal. That evening, I heard Daniel return. Their voices carried through the floorboards. Did you talk to Hansen? Melissa asked. Yes, Daniel replied, his tone uncertain. He said we need her signature. Without it, nothing can happen. Then we will get it, Melissa said firmly. We just need to push harder. She cannot hold out forever. Daniel hesitated. What if she refuses completely? Melissa's laugh was sharp. Then we make her life unbearable until she has no choice. People like her crumble under pressure. Trust me. My grip tightened around the envelope. Let her laugh. She thought I was crumbling, but I was gathering strength. The night passed, slowly, each hour filled with restless thoughts. I dreamed of storms, of locked doors, of Melissa's voice dripping with venom. But beneath it all, there was a fire. I would not surrender. By morning, I had decided. It was no longer enough to gather evidence. I needed to strike first. When they both left that afternoon, I climbed out of the basement and stood in the living room, staring at the family photos that lined the mantel. Pictures of Daniel as a child, his smile wide and innocent, his eyes bright with trust. Pictures of us together at birthdays, holidays, milestones. The boy in those photos would never have imagined this future. But that boy was gone, replaced by a man who let his wife twist him into something unrecognizable. I turned to the envelope in my hands. These papers were their weapon, but they would be mine too. I would bring them to Mr. Hansen, show him I had never agreed, never signed. I would make it clear that I was still the rightful owner, and I would not do it alone. My phone buzzed in my pocket. A message from Ruth finally appeared. I believe you. Tell me what to do. Tears stung my eyes. For the first time in days, I felt less alone. I typed quickly. Meet me tomorrow. I will explain everything. Do not tell anyone, especially Daniel. I slipped the phone back into my pocket and took one last look around the house. The walls whispered with memories, but now they also echoed with betrayal. Melissa and Daniel thought they were playing a clever game. They thought I was cornered, but I was no pawn. I was the one holding the truth, and soon I would make my move. The morning air was sharp, carrying the scent of wet earth from the storm 2 nights before. I had not left the house in days, slipping from room to room like a phantom, always careful not to be seen. But today was different. Today, I would step into the light again. That when Daniel and Melissa left for work, I pulled on my coat and clutched the envelope of forged deed papers against my chest. Every nerve in my body buzzed with tension. What if Melissa had doubled back? What if Daniel forgot something and came home early? But I could not live in fear forever. I slipped out through the back door, my steps light, my heart pounding. The crisp air filled my lungs, and for the first time in what felt like years, I felt alive. Free. Ruth was waiting at the corner cafe, 2 blocks away. She rose when she saw me, her eyes wide with shock. "Margaret," she whispered, pulling me into a hug. "Look at you. You look worn thin." Her concern broke me for a moment. My throat tightened, and I struggled to keep my composure. "They locked me out, Ruth, in the rain. And now they are trying to take the house." She pulled back, her face hardening. I knew it. I knew that woman was trouble from the start. What has Daniel become? How could he let this happen? I slid the envelope across the table. "They had these prepared. All they need is my signature." Hansen confirmed it. "Without me, nothing moves forward, but Melissa is determined to wear me down." Ruth flipped through the papers, her jaw tightening. "This is criminal. We need to get ahead of this before she pushes you into a corner." I called Hansen. "He knows I have not agreed. But Melissa has a list: locksmith, appraiser, retirement brochure. She is not stopping. She wants me gone." Ruth reached across the table, gripping my hand. "Then we will not let her win. We will fight her with her own weapons." Her conviction steadied me. For the first time since this nightmare began, I felt less like prey and more like a woman with allies. We spent the next hour plotting. Ruth would contact an old friend who worked in real estate law, someone who could advise us outside of Hansen's involvement. I would gather every scrap of evidence in the house: emails, lists, banknotes, anything that tied Melissa to the scheme. "You cannot stay in that basement forever," Ruth warned. "You need protection." "I will manage," I said firmly. "If Melissa suspects I know, she will only tighten her grip. I need to let her believe I am still caged." Ruth's eyes softened. "You always were stubborn, but promise me, Margaret, you will not face this alone anymore." "I promise." We parted ways with an unspoken understanding. The war had begun. When I slipped back into the house, the silence was heavy, but I no longer felt crushed by it. I had a mission now. I searched more thoroughly than ever before. In Melissa's nightstand, I found brochures for retirement communities, glossy pages filled with smiling seniors and sterile rooms. In Daniel's desk drawer, I discovered credit card bills with suspicious charges, large withdrawals and deposits that did not match his salary. I photographed everything, building a digital arsenal. As I worked, a thought gnawed at me. Daniel was not the mastermind. Melissa was. But Daniel was complicit. He had heard her cruelty, seen her manipulation, and still chosen silence. That silence was its own betrayal. By late afternoon, I retreated to the basement, reviewing the photos on my phone. Each image was another brick in the wall I was building against them. I imagined the look on Melissa's face when she realized I had beaten her at her own game. But victory felt distant that night as I lay awake on the hard floor, listening to their voices above. "Did Hansen call back?" Daniel asked. No. Melissa snapped. "But he will. And when he does, I want everything ready. The locks change on Friday, and the appraiser comes Thursday. By next week, she will have no ground left." "Melissa," Daniel said softly, "what if she refuses to sign? What if she fights?" Her laugh cut through me like a blade. "Then she fights. But I do not lose, Daniel. Not to her." I pressed my hands over my ears, but the words had already sunk deep. The next morning, I received a message from Ruth. "Met with a lawyer friend. He says Melissa cannot touch the deed without you, but be careful. If she forges your signature, it will be harder to fight. Protect everything." A cold chill ran through me. Melissa had already forged lists, plotted schemes. Would she forge my name too? I went to the study, my mind racing. In the drawer beneath the printer, I found it stationery with my signature practice sheets, dozens of them, my name scrawled over and over, each attempt neater than the last. My stomach twisted. She was practicing. Asterisk. I snapped photos and sent them to Ruth. "She is preparing to forge my signature. We need to act faster." Ruth replied immediately. "Meet me tomorrow at the lawyer's office. Bring everything you have." I slid the papers back into the drawer, my hands trembling. "Tomorrow," the truth would finally begin to surface. That night, I stayed awake long after Daniel and Melissa had gone to bed. I sat in the basement, surrounded by the relics of my life: photo albums, boxes of letters, childhood toys. Every item was a reminder of the years I had poured into this home, the love I had given freely. And now, the very people who should have cherished that legacy were trying to erase me. But I would not let them. When dawn broke, I felt stronger than I had in years. The war had shifted. I was no longer just surviving. I was preparing to fight back with every weapon I had. The sun rose behind a curtain of gray clouds, casting the world in a muted, expectant light. I wrapped my coat tightly around me as Ruth's car pulled up in front of the cafe. My heart hammered against my ribs as I climbed in, clutching the envelope stuffed with photographs, forged papers, and Melissa's practice sheets of my signature. This was no longer speculation. This was proof. "You are ready?" Ruth asked, her hands steady on the steering wheel. "As ready as I will ever be," I answered, though my voice shook. We drove in silence, the hum of the engine filling the space between us. My eyes flicked to every passing car, every pedestrian. Fear gnawed at me. What if Melissa had someone watching? What if Daniel had grown suspicious? But the further we drove, the more the weight on my chest lifted. For the first time since that night in the rain, I was leaving my prison not to beg or survive, but to strike. Mr. Hansen's office was a modest building tucked between a bakery and a pharmacy. Inside, the air smelled faintly of ink and coffee. The receptionist led us into a quiet room where Mr. Hansen rose from behind his desk. His eyes widened slightly when he saw the envelope in my hands. "Mrs. Margaret," he said, motioning for us to sit. "I was not expecting you so soon." "I could not wait," I replied, placing the envelope on the desk. "They are preparing to forge my signature. Melissa has been practicing. I need to protect my home before she takes everything." Mr. Hansen opened the envelope carefully, his brow furrowing as he sifted through the papers. He lingered over the practice sheets, his lips tightening. "This is serious," he said at last. "If she attempts to pass forged documents as genuine, it is fraud. You would have grounds for criminal charges." The word fraud rang through me like a bell. It gave a name to this storm I had been weathering, a name that stripped away Melissa's veil of sophistication and left only her greed. "We need to make a preemptive move," Ruth said firmly. "File something official to prevent them from going any further." Double quotes. Mr. Hansen nodded. "We can place a notice of restriction on the property deed. That way, no transfer can be processed without court verification of your consent. It will raise red flags if anyone tries to move ahead." Relief flooded me, though fear still gnawed at the edges. "Do it," I said. "Please, do it immediately." As he began drafting the paperwork, Ruth leaned closer to me. "This is it, Margaret. You are not powerless. You are putting up walls they cannot tear down." For the first time, I believed her. After signing the necessary forms, I left the office, feeling lighter than I had in weeks. Yet beneath the relief was another emotion, darker and sharper. Anger. They had forced me into this corner, and now they would discover I was not the frail woman they believed. That night, back in the basement, I listened more closely to the sounds above. Melissa's voice was sharp, her tone edged with impatience. "Why has Hansen not called back?" she demanded. Daniel muttered something inaudible. "He is stalling," Melissa snapped. "I do not like being stalled. Something is wrong." My lips curved in the faintest smile. The cracks were beginning to show. Later, as dishes clinked in the sink, I heard Daniel's voice rise. "Maybe we should just stop, Melissa. Maybe this is too much. Too much." Melissa's laugh was cold. "Do you want to live your life broke, Daniel? Do you want to keep waiting for scraps while your mother hoards everything she owes us? This house, this money, it should have been ours already." Silence followed, heavy and damning. Daniel did not argue, but he did not agree either. The fracture was small, but I felt it. Melissa's control was not absolute. The next day, Ruth visited me in secret. She came through the back door while Melissa was out shopping. Her presence was a balm. She carried a thermos of hot soup and a folder of legal notes from her friend. "We are building a case," she said, handing me the folder. "The lawyer agrees Melissa is vulnerable now. If she tries to push forward, we can shut her down." I sipped the soup, the warmth spreading through me. "Do you think Daniel knows how far she has gone?" Ruth's eyes darkened. "He knows enough, but he is letting her steer the ship. It makes him guilty too." Her words stung, though I knew they were true. My son was no innocent bystander. He had chosen silence when he could have chosen me. As the days passed, I felt the tension in the house shift. Melissa moved with more agitation, her footsteps sharper, her voice clipped. Daniel grew quieter, answering her in shorter bursts, retreating into silence. One evening, I risked stepping into the kitchen after they had gone to bed. On the counter lay a new list, written in Melissa's precise handwriting. Call, new lawyer, appraisal, retirement home visit. I took a photo, my hands steady now. Her desperation was clear. She was scrambling, losing her grip. That night, I whispered into the quiet basement, as if the walls themselves were listening. You think you are clever, Melissa, but the ground is shifting beneath you. The next morning, everything changed. I woke to the sound of Daniel's raised voice. I said, enough, Melissa. I am tired of this. She is my mother. I froze, every muscle tense. Your mother is standing in the way of our future, Melissa shot back. She is selfish, Daniel. You said it yourself. That was different, he argued. This has gone too far. My breath caught in my throat. Daniel, for the first time, was pushing back. Melissa's voice sharpened like glass. If you do not have the stomach for this, then maybe you are weaker than I thought. But I will not stop. With or without you, I will finish what I started. The silence that followed was deafening. I could almost see Daniel's face, torn between loyalty and fear, between the woman he married and the mother he abandoned. When I heard the door slam, I knew Daniel had left. Melissa's footsteps stormed through the house, her anger a storm brewing overhead. I sat in the basement, clutching my phone. The photos, the evidence, the cracks in their facade were widening, and soon, the entire structure would crumble. But with cracks came danger. Melissa was cornered now, and a cornered opponent was always the most dangerous. As I lay awake that night, the rain tapping against the small basement window, I knew the storm was far from over. But for the first time, I was no longer just surviving it. I was standing in its eye, ready to face whatever thunder Melissa had left. The house had grown restless, as though the walls themselves sensed the shift in power. The silence that once weighed me down now felt charged, humming with unseen currents. I knew Melissa felt it too. Her voice grew sharper with each passing day, her movements more frantic. The woman who once carried herself with icy precision was beginning to unravel. I continued my careful routine, documenting every scrap of evidence, every reckless note she left behind. The folder in my possession had become a shield, one I knew would soon be used, but until the right moment, I had to endure the storm. That morning began with the sound of Melissa on the phone. I lingered near the basement door, straining to catch her words. Yes, I need a rush appraisal, she said, her tone clipped. I do not care what it costs. I want it done this week. The house is ready. The owner will not be a problem. Her certainty made my blood boil. She spoke of me as though I no longer existed, as though I were a shadow already erased. Later, I heard Daniel's voice, softer this time, less certain. Melissa, maybe we should wait. Hansen has not returned our calls. It feels risky. Melissa's reply was swift and venomous. Do you want to be poor forever, Daniel? Do you want to watch your mother cling to every penny while we scrape by? This is happening. I am not asking for your approval. His silence was long, heavy, and damning. By evening, the tension reached its breaking point. Melissa stormed into the kitchen, the sound of papers slamming onto the counter making me flinch even from the basement below. I am done waiting, she snapped. Tomorrow I am calling a new lawyer. Hansen is useless. I will not let some old woman stand in my way. Her words ignited something in me, a fire that had been smoldering since the night they locked me out in the rain. I rose from the basement, my hands trembling not from fear, but from fury. For weeks I had hidden, a ghost in my own home. Tonight, I would no longer cower. I stepped into the kitchen doorway. Melissa's head snapped up, her eyes narrowing. You, she hissed. What are you doing up here? I live here, I said evenly, my voice steady. This is my home. Her lips curled into a smile that did not reach her eyes, not for much longer. Daniel entered from the living room, his face paling when he saw me. Mother, save it. I cut him off. I have heard enough from both of you. Do you think I do not know what you are planning? The appraisers, the lawyers, the retirement homes. Melissa crossed her arms, her chin high. So you have been snooping. How pathetic. Eavesdropping in your own house like a criminal. Criminal. I stepped closer, my eyes locked on hers. You are the one forging my signature. You are the one trying to steal what does not belong to you. Asterisk to you. Asterisk. For the first time, I saw a flicker of fear in her eyes. It vanished quickly, masked by disdain. But I had seen it. You cannot prove anything, she said coldly. I pulled my phone from my pocket and tapped the screen. The folder of photos glowed in the dim light. Every list you wrote, every practice sheet of my name, every note about the appraisers and the locks. I have it all. And Hansen has it too. Daniel's face drained of color. Hansen, you yes, I said firmly. I went to him. I filed restrictions on the deed. You cannot move forward without me, no matter how hard you try. Melissa's hand tightened on the edge of the counter, her knuckles white. For a moment, the mask slipped, her composure cracked, revealing the raw desperation beneath. You think this makes you strong, she spat. You think a few papers will stop me. I know it will, I replied, because the law is on my side, and so is the truth. Daniel stepped between us, his hands raised as though to calm a storm. Enough, both of you. This is madness. I turned to him, my voice breaking. Madness is watching your son stand by while his wife tears apart everything his mother built. Madness is being treated like a burden instead of the woman who gave you life. His eyes flickered, guilt carving lines into his face. But before he could speak, Melissa shoved past him, her fury radiating like heat. You will regret this, she snarled. You have no idea who you are dealing with. She stormed out of the kitchen, the slam of the front door shaking the walls. Daniel stood frozen, his face a canvas of conflict. I did not want it to come to this, he murmured, his voice barely audible. But it has, I said quietly. And now you must choose, Daniel. Your silence has already spoken volumes. I left him there, rooted in indecision, and returned to the basement. My hands trembled as I sank onto the cot, but inside me, something had shifted. For weeks, I had hidden like prey. Tonight, I had stood my ground. Hours later, I heard the creak of the front door. Melissa had returned. Their voices rose in muffled argument. She knows, Daniel, Melissa hissed. She has evidence. If she goes public, we are finished. Maybe we should stop, he said weakly. Stop. Melissa's voice cracked with fury. Do you want to crawl back into that basement with her? Because that is where you will end up if she wins. I will not let her ruin me. I will destroy her before I let that happen. Her words chilled me to the bone. This was no longer about property or money. It was about power, about control. Melissa was cornered, and a cornered enemy was dangerous. I lay awake until dawn, staring at the ceiling, the echo of her threats ringing in my ears. She would not stop. Not now, not ever. But neither would I. The morning after the confrontation felt like the calm before a storm. The house was unnaturally still, yet beneath the silence, I sensed movement plans forming, strategies tightening. Melissa had shown her hand, and now I knew she would strike harder, faster, more viciously. I dressed slowly, pulling on a sweater and smoothing my hair, as though armor could be found in ordinary routines. My heart beat steadily, but my mind raced. Every moment now was dangerous. Every word and step had weight. When I emerged from the basement, Daniel was sitting at the kitchen table, staring into a cold cup of coffee, his shoulders slumped, his eyes shadowed. For a moment, I saw the boy he once was, caught between choices too heavy for him. Daniel, I said softly. He flinched, looking up. Mother, I never wanted it to come to this. Yet, here we are, I replied. Your silence gave her power. His jaw tightened. You do not understand. Shemalisha, she gets into my head. She says things, convinces me it is the only way. I feel like I cannot breathe without her telling me how. Then you are a prisoner too, I said. But, unlike me, you chose your chains. His eyes filled with something shame, regret, or perhaps fear, but, before he could answer, the front door opened. Melissa entered, her heels striking the floor with a rhythm that made my stomach twist. She carried a folder in her hand, her lips curved into a smile that did not touch her eyes. Good morning, she said, her voice syrupy and sharp. I hope you both slept well, because today is going to be very busy. I stiffened. What have you done now? She placed the folder on the table, flipping it open with deliberate calm. Inside were glossy brochures from several retirement homes. She slid them across the table toward me. I toured 3 facilities yesterday, she said smoothly. Lovely places, all of them. Gardens, activities, medical staff. You will be very comfortable. I am not leaving my home, I said firmly. Her smile widened. That is where you are wrong. I spoke with a consultant, with Daniel's agreement, and given your declining independence, we can have you placed in care. It is all perfectly legal. You will have a nice little room while we handle the house and finances. My blood ran cold. She was not only planning to steal the house, she wanted to lock me away, strip me of autonomy entirely. Daniel shifted uncomfortably. Melissa, maybe we should not. Do not start, she snapped, cutting him off. This is happening. It is for the best. I stood, my voice rising. You will not succeed. I have already taken steps with Hansen. The deed is protected. You cannot touch it without my consent. Her eyes glittered with malice. We will see about that. She gathered the brochures, tucking them back into her folder, then leaned closer. If you resist, Margaret, I will make sure everyone believes you are losing your mind. One phone call, and the papers will say you are unfit. You will not only lose this house, you will lose yourself. The air seemed to thin around me, every breath sharp and shallow. Her threat was not just cruel. It was dangerous. She wanted to erase me, to rewrite my life as a story of frailty and incompetence. After she swept out of the room, I turned to Daniel. Do you hear her? Do you understand what she is planning? He rubbed his forehead, his voice strained. Cannot stop her. She will not listen to me anymore. Then listen to me, I said, my voice steady despite the trembling inside. If you still care for me at all, if you still remember the mother who raised you, then help me, because if you do not, she will destroy us both. Daniel's eyes darted toward the door where Melissa had gone, then back to me. He said nothing, but in his silence, I saw the battle raging within him. That afternoon, I called Ruth. I kept my voice low, my words clipped, knowing Melissa might be listening. She is planning to put me in a home. She thinks she can declare me unfit. Ruth's voice sharpened. She is cornered, Margaret. That is why she is striking harder. We need to act now. What do we do? I asked, clutching the phone as though it were a lifeline. Meet me tomorrow at Hansen's office, she said. We will draft a formal statement. You will assert your competency in writing, with legal witnesses. That way, if she tries to paint you as unfit, we will have proof she is lying. The plan gave me a flicker of hope. Still, dread lingered. Melissa was not one to back down quietly. That night, the storm broke. Rain lashed against the windows. Wind howled around the eaves, and thunder cracked the sky open. The sound carried me back to that first night, when they locked me outside, laughing at my pleas. I could not sleep. I sat awake in the basement, listening to the storm and the muffled voices upstairs. Melissa was on the phone again, her voice rising and falling in urgent tones. I caught fragments. Expedited process medical affidavit, unfit to manage property. My stomach clenched. She was moving faster than I imagined. The next morning, Ruth arrived early, her coat dripping from the rain. She led me to her car quickly, her eyes scanning the street as though expecting Melissa to appear. At Hansen's office, I signed the competency affidavit with hands that trembled but did not falter. Witnesses looked on as I read every line aloud, my voice strong. Hansen nodded approvingly. This will make it much harder for her to claim otherwise, he said. If she attempts to challenge, we will have the court on your side. Relief washed over me, but only briefly. As we left the office, I saw her, Melissa, standing across the street, her eyes locked on mine. Rain streaked her face, but her expression was carved from stone. She had followed us. She knew. For a long moment, we stared at one another, the storm raging around us. In her gaze, I saw fury, but beneath it, I saw something else, fear. She was losing control, and she knew it. Ruth touched my arm. Do not look away. Let her see you are not afraid. So I held her gaze until she turned sharply and disappeared into the crowd. Back at home, the atmosphere shifted again. Melissa no longer masked her hostility with sweet smiles. She moved through the house like a predator, her words barbed, her tone venomous. Daniel grew quieter still, his presence fading into the background. That evening, she confronted me directly in the living room. You think you are clever, she said, her voice low and dangerous. Running to lawyers, waving your little papers. Do you really believe that will save you? I know it will, I said calmly, because I am not afraid of you anymore. Her eyes narrowed. You should be. She leaned in, so close I could feel the heat of her breath. This house, this life, you will not win. I will take it all, one way or another. I met her glare with a steady gaze. You have already lost, Melissa. You just do not see it yet. Her laugh was sharp and bitter, echoing through the empty room. We will see, Margaret, we will see. As she stormed upstairs, I sank into the chair, my body shaking. But beneath the fear was something strict resolve. The battle lines were drawn. The final confrontation was coming, and I would not back down. I would not back down. The morning of the reckoning began with stillness. No rain lashed the windows, no thunder rattled the glass, no storm pressed against the walls. Yet I felt one brewing inside the house, heavy and inevitable. Melissa had been circling like a hawk for days, snapping at Daniel, sneering at me, her composure unraveling thread by thread. She had grown reckless, and reckless people make mistakes. That morning, she dressed sharply, as though preparing for battle. She wore a tailored jacket and carried a leather folder under her arm. Her heels clicked against the floor like a drumbeat of war. I have a meeting, she said flatly. By this evening, everything will be decided. I suggest you pack your things, Margaret. It will make the transition easier. I looked at her, calm and unflinching. This is still my home, and by this evening, it will be clear who truly belongs here. Her eyes narrowed, but she said nothing. She simply smiled, a cold, brittle thing, and left. Daniel lingered at the table, his face pale. Mother, I do not know what she is doing, but it feels dangerous. I have never seen her this desperate. She is losing control, I said, and desperate people reveal themselves. The truth is closer than she realizes. I spent the afternoon gathering my papers. Hansen had prepared everything. The competency affidavit, the restrictions on the deed, the copies of Melissa's forged lists and practice signatures. Each document was tucked carefully into a folder, the weight of it heavy in my hands. When Ruth arrived, she embraced me tightly. Are you ready? I have never been more ready, I said. Together we drove to Hansen's office where the final steps were laid. He had summoned Melissa and Daniel for a meeting, under the guise of discussing next steps for the property. What she did not know was that the meeting would be her undoing. The conference room was dark, its long polished table gleaming under the fluorescent lights. Hansen sat at the head, calm and steady, his presence grounding me. Ruth sat beside me, her hand resting lightly on mine. The door opened, and Melissa entered, Daniel trailing behind her. She carried herself like a queen marching to her throne, her chin high, her folder clutched tightly. Let's not waste time, she said briskly, sitting across from me. I have everything in order. All we need is Margaret's consent, which I am sure we can persuade her to give. Her arrogance almost made me laugh. She still believed she had the upper hand. Hansen cleared his throat. Before we begin, I would like to review some documents. Mrs. Carter, he gestured to me, has provided evidence regarding recent activities in this household. Melissa's smile faltered. Evidence? What nonsense is this? I slid my folder across the table, opening it slowly. Photos spilled out, her forged practice sheets, her to-do lists about the locks, the appraisals, the notes she thought I would never see. Melissa's face drained of color, then flushed with rage. This proves nothing, she snapped. It proves everything, Hansen said firmly. Combined with Mrs. Carter's signed affidavit of competency, witnessed and filed legally, it establishes not only her right to remain in her home but also the malicious intent of those attempting to remove her. Melissa's composure cracked. She shot to her feet, her voice rising. You cannot do this to me. I have worked too hard, given too much, you have stolen too much. I cut in, my voice sharp and clear. You tried to erase me. You tried to lock me away, to silence me, to steal everything I built. But you forgot one thing, Melissa. I am not weak, and I will not be erased. The room fell silent. Daniel's head hung low, shame written across his face. Hansen leaned forward. Mrs. Carter is within her rights to pursue criminal charges for forgery and coercion. At the very least, this evidence will ensure any attempt to transfer or sell the property is void. Melissa, your plans end here. Melissa's fury boiled over. She slammed her folder onto the table, papers scattering like broken glass. Do you think you have won, Margaret? Do you think this changes anything? He is still my husband. This house will be mine one day. Daniel finally looked up, his voice shaking. No, Melissa. Not like this. Not ever. I cannot keep watching you destroy my family. I will not. Her head whipped toward him, her eyes blazing. You spineless fool. After everything I have done for you, what you have done, he interrupted, his voice gaining strength, is poisonous both. You turned me against my own mother. You made me complicit in cruelty I cannot bear to remember. You may be my wife, Melissa, but I will not stand by you in this. The crack of betrayal echoed louder than any storm. Melissa's face twisted with disbelief, then fury. She gathered her scattered papers with trembling hands, her composure gone. This is not over, she hissed. You will regret crossing me. She stormed out of the room, the door slamming behind her. Silence filled the space. She left, heavy and suffocating. Daniel sat back, his face pale, his body shaking. I am sorry, Mother, he whispered. I should have stopped this sooner. I should have protected you. Tears pricked my eyes, but my voice was steady. You cannot undo what has been done, Daniel, but you can decide who you will be from this day forward. He nodded, his eyes wet. I want to make it right. Hanson gathered the papers, stacking them neatly. With this evidence, Melissa will not be able to touch the property, and if she attempts further action, we will be ready. When Ruth drove me home that evening, the weight of the past months seemed to lift, replaced by a profound, quiet strength. The house stood tall against the setting sun, its windows glowing with warm light. My house, my sanctuary. Inside, I walked through each room, slowly, touching the walls, the furniture, the photographs that told my story. For so long, Melissa had tried to turn this place into a prison, but now, it was mine again. Daniel approached me in the living room, his eyes uncertain. May I stay tonight? He asked softly. I studied him for a long moment. You may, but know this, Daniel, you must earn back the trust you have broken. That will take time. I understand, he said. As night fell, I sat by the window, watching the stars prick the sky. The storm was over. The house was quiet, and for the first time in months, I felt peace. Melissa's shadow still lingered in the distance, but she no longer held power over me. I had faced her, unmasked her, and survived. I was not just a mother, not just a widow, not just a woman in a house too big for her. I was Margaret Carter, and I had taken back my life.